I stand frozen at the edge of the long oak dining table, watching my entire family laugh at a joke I wasn't invited to hear. My sister's wedding reception is in full swing, a glittering affair of champagne fountains and fairy lights woven through the grand ballroom's rafters. I wasn't on the guest list, just the help, dressed in a starched black button-down, pressed slacks, and a crisp white apron. I was told to hand out the plates. It was my mother's idea, a quiet, sharp punishment for my existence. "You're not exactly presentable, Blythe," she'd said, her voice a low murmur that did nothing to soften the blow. "But you can still be useful. So here I am, being useful. A ghost in a uniform." I'm about to lower a plate of pan-seared scallops onto the table, when a sharply dressed waiter steps beside me. His uniform is identical to mine, but his posture is different. He carries himself with an air of authority. He leans in, his voice just loud enough to cut through the din of polite laughter, and asks, "Where should I set yours, ma'am? Or should I say, CEO?" Every jaw drops. The sound is almost comical, a collective, silent unhinging. My cousin Anya's wine glass slips from her suddenly numb fingers, shattering against the polished floorboards with a crash that seems to echo in the sudden, cavernous silence. My father's smirk, the one he's been wearing all night, the one that says "I told you so," shatters as if the glass had been his own face. My mother, Wren, visibly gulps, her carefully constructed poise crumbling like a sandcastle against a wave. Her hand flies to her pearl necklace, a nervous tick I've known my whole life. The same people who, just moments ago, were laughing at me for being a useless burden, the ones who snickered as I refilled their water glasses, are utterly, devastatingly speechless now. They don't know what I built in the silence they relegated me to. They don't know about the nights I didn't sleep, the sacrifices I made, the empire I constructed brick by painful brick while they slept soundly, secure in their judgment of me. My sister Velda, the beautiful, cruel bride, turns to look at me. Her eyes, usually so full of cold triumph, are wide with confusion and a dawning, horrified disbelief. She looks from me to the waiter, then back to me, her perfect rose-tinted world tilting on its axis. She smirks each time she makes eye contact with me tonight, a little flick of her lips that says, "This is your place, below me." The smirk is gone now, replaced by a slack-jawed vacancy. My father, who has made a point of looking through me all evening as if I were a piece of furniture, is now staring at me with an intensity that burns. His gaze isn't one of pride, but of frantic calculation. The gears are turning in his head, trying to make sense of a reality that has just been torn to shreds. The whispers from the guests, the little snickers from my cousins, die in their throats. The air is thick with their shock, a physical thing I can feel pressing against my skin. They called me a failure, a dropout, a perpetual disappointment, a burden they had to carry with sighs and rolled eyes. They didn't know that behind the closed door of my childhood bedroom, I was building, I was grinding, I was bleeding for a future they couldn't even conceive of. I swallow the bitterness that has been my constant companion for years. It tastes like ash and iron. My moment hasn't come yet, not fully, but it will. It's hanging in the air right now, a promise as sharp and clear as the sound of that breaking glass. 2 years ago, this moment was unimaginable. It was a fantasy I couldn't even afford to dream. I remember the drive home, the worn-out steering wheel of my 10-year-old sedan feeling slick beneath my sweaty palms. I'd just been fired from my retail job. Not for stealing, not for incompetence, but for not being the right fit. It was a gentle way of saying I was too quiet, too awkward, not bubbly enough to push a store credit card on someone buying a single pair of socks. I returned to the family home, my tail between my legs, hoping for a sliver of support, a soft place to land. What I got was an interrogation. My father, Martin, sat at the head of the dinner table that night, my supposed birthday dinner, and looked at me with the weary disappointment of a man staring at a bad investment. "Fired," he'd said, not as a question, but as a final judgment. "From a clothing store, Blythe? What is there to even get fired from? You fold shirts." The words were like stones, each one hitting a soft, vulnerable part of me. Velda, ever the opportunist, saw her opening and pounced. She let out a little tinkling laugh, the kind that was designed to sound elegant, but felt like nails on a chalkboard. Even fast food rejected you last year, didn't they? Now a retail job? That's almost impressive, failing at things that require zero skill. My mother just sat there, picking at her salad, her silence a form of agreement. Her fear of rocking the boat, of displeasing my father, was always stronger than any maternal instinct to protect me. The rest of the family, aunts and uncles and cousins, chuckled along, their laughter a chorus of confirmation. I was the family joke, the cautionary tale. I fled the table, mumbling something about needing air, and cried in my car, not loud, heaving sobs, but the quiet, desperate tears of someone who has finally hit rock bottom and found it harder and colder than they ever imagined. I gripped the steering wheel, my forehead pressed against it, and I questioned everything. My worth, my intelligence, my very right to take up space in the world. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just defective, a faulty product from the family assembly line. It was in that moment of absolute despair, scrolling mindlessly through my phone in the dark, the screen a harsh artificial light in my tear-blurred vision, that I saw it. It wasn't a sign from the heavens, it was a targeted ad. A simple, text-based ad on a social media feed. It read, "Learn to build something that no one can take from you." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow, something no one can take from you. My job had been taken. My dignity had been taken. My confidence was in tatters. The idea of possessing something, anything, that was truly and irrevocably mine, felt like a lifeline. I clicked it. I don't even remember what the ad was for specifically, some kind of online course or webinar, but the click led me down a rabbit hole. I spent hours that night, huddled in my car, the engine off, the cold seeping into my bones, watching YouTube videos about e-commerce, about branding, about logistics and supply chains. I learned about Shopify and dropshipping, about creating a brand voice and identifying a target audience. It was a foreign language, a new world opening up on the tiny screen in my hand. For the first time in forever, a flicker of something other than shame ignited within me. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something harder, something sharper. It was defiance. I made a promise to myself in the silence of that car, with the faint scent of my birthday cake still clinging to the air. Never again. I would never again be in a position where their opinions could break me. I would never again have my worth determined by a manager at a clothing store or the casual cruelty of my own family. I would build something, and I would build it in silence, where they couldn't touch it, where they couldn't mock it, where they couldn't break it. That night, the girl who cried in her car died, and someone else began to take her place. The YouTube rabbit hole led me to a free business webinar. It was hosted by a man named Mirko Dale, a name that sounded severe and Eastern European. He wasn't like the other online gurus with their rented Lamborghinis and flashy promises of overnight riches. He was blunt, almost abrasive. He spoke about failure rates, about market saturation, about the brutal, unglamorous work required to build something real. He was a former venture capitalist, he said, who had grown tired of funding companies with no soul. Now he coached a select few, people who had grit, people who weren't afraid of the grind. He had a look in his eyes, even through the pixelated video stream, that was piercing. It felt like he could see right through the screen, right into the desperate hope I was trying to conceal. During the Q&A session, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I had nothing. No capital, no experience, no business degree. I was a retail reject living in my parents' house. What could I possibly say to a man like that? So I didn't ask a question. After the webinar ended, I found him on a professional networking site and sent him a direct message. It was a desperate, rambling plea, a summary of my pathetic situation and the tiny defiant spark that had been lit in my car. I told him I had nothing to offer but a willingness to work harder than anyone he'd ever met. I hit send and immediately felt a wave of crushing humiliation. He would never reply. Why would he? I closed my laptop and tried to sleep, but my mind was racing. The next morning, there was a notification, a reply from Mirko Dale. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. It was one line, just one sentence. If you can build a pitch deck in 48 hours, I'll read it. That was it. No encouragement, no sympathy, just a challenge, a cold hard wall to either scale or walk away from. A pitch deck. I had to Google what a proper pitch deck even looked like. I found templates, examples, articles on what investors look for, market analysis, competitive landscape, unique value proposition, financial projections. It was a mountain of work, and I had 2 days. I didn't sleep. I survived on stale coffee and the sheer manic energy of having a single chance. I barricaded myself in my room, the same room where I had felt so small and insignificant, and I turned it into a war room. I researched market trends for hours, my eyes burning from the screen. I analyzed potential competitors, their strength, their weaknesses. I had to invent a business from scratch. What could I possibly sell? I thought about my own life, my own pain, the feeling of being burned out, overwhelmed, disorganized, the desire for simple, elegant tools to bring a little order to the chaos. The idea began to form. Minimalist planners, beautiful, simple planners designed for women like me, who felt like they were drowning. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was honest. It was mine. I poured all my frustration, all my yearning for control, into the design. I used a free online tool to create mock-ups. For the financial projections, I had to be brutally realistic. I built a spreadsheet, forecasting sales based on tiny incremental growth. I finished with 10 minutes to spare. The final presentation was raw, unpolished, probably full of rookie mistakes, but it was complete. I attached the file to an email and sent it, my hand trembling as I clicked the button. The silence that followed was deafening. A full day went by. Then another. I was convinced I had failed. He'd seen the work of an amateur and dismissed it. Then an email notification popped up, from Mirko. My breath hitched. I opened it slowly. "It's rough," the email began, and my stomach plummeted. "Your market analysis is thin, and your financial projections are optimistic nonsense, but I see a spark. I see hunger." He then offered me a deal. He would mentor me. He would give me access to his resources, his network, his brutal, unflinching feedback, but he was clear. "This isn't charity," he wrote. "I am a businessman. I expect results. I expect a return on my investment of time. You will treat this like a war. Every decision, every dollar, every minute matters. If you are not prepared to bleed for this, walk away now." I read the email 3 times. He wasn't offering a handout, he was offering a sword and pointing me toward a battlefield. For the first time, someone saw potential in me, not as a charity case, but as a fighter. To fund my first step, my Shopify plan, I had to sell the only thing of value I owned, my old DSLR camera. I had bought it years ago, dreaming of becoming a photographer. It felt symbolic, letting go of an old, failed dream to fund a new, terrifying one. I sold it on an online marketplace for a few $100s. It was just enough. The grind began. My first product was the set of minimalist planners I had designed in that frantic 48-hour window. I named the brand Aura, for the quiet energy I wanted it to represent. I used the money from my camera to pay for the first month of my Shopify plan and a small initial print run from a local company. The boxes arrived at my parents' house, and I had to quickly shuttle them up to my bedroom before my father could ask what new waste of money this was. My workspace was the floor of my room, surrounded by cardboard boxes filled with my hopes. I built the website myself, staying up until 3 in the morning watching tutorials, my eyes gritty with exhaustion. The day I launched, I felt a dizzying mix of terror and excitement. I posted about it on my personal anonymous social media accounts, and then, nothing. For a full week, there was silence. The Shopify app on my phone, which was supposed to make a satisfying cha-ching sound with every sale, was mockingly quiet. The doubt began to creep back in, a cold, familiar poison. Velda's voice echoed in my head, laughing. My father's disappointed sigh seemed to hang in the air. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was just another elaborate way for me to fail. I cried again. Not in the car this time, but on the floor of my bedroom, my head resting on a box of unsold planners. I felt foolish, pathetic. Then on day 9, As I was mindlessly refreshing my sales dashboard for the 100th time, it happened. A single order. The screen changed. The numbers, which had been a string of zeros, now showed one sale. Total, $24.99. My phone made the cha-ching sound, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. My heart pounded. It was real. Someone, a complete stranger, had seen my creation and decided it was worth their money. Her name was Ingrid, and she was from Nebraska. I could see her name and email address on the order form. A wave of overwhelming gratitude washed over me. This one person had just validated the last 2 years of my silent struggle. I did something unconventional. I didn't just send the standard, automated order confirmation. I opened my email client and wrote to her personally. I told her I was the founder of the company, that she was my very first customer, and I thanked her from the bottom of my heart for taking a chance on me. I didn't expect a reply, but she wrote back a few hours later. She told me she was a young doctor, drowning in paperwork and scheduling, and that my planner's simple, clean design was exactly what she'd been looking for. She said my email had made her day. Ingrid became my first unofficial brand ambassador. She posted a picture of the planner on her Instagram, and a few of her friends bought one. It was a tiny trickle, but it was a start. I realized then that the business wasn't just about the product, it was about the connection. I created an Instagram page for Aura. I didn't have money for ads, so I focused on content. I wrote about burnout, about the pressure to be perfect, about finding small moments of peace in a chaotic world. I wasn't just selling a planner, I was selling a feeling of understanding. I spent my days packing orders on my bedroom floor, and my nights reaching out to micro-influencers, people with a few thousand followers who had a genuine connection with their audience. I didn't offer them money. I offered them a free planner and my story. Some ignored me, but some said yes. The first month, I made $800 in revenue. It wasn't much, but after the cost of goods and shipping, it was enough to cover my expenses and reinvest. The next month, it was $1,500. The month after that, $3,000. It wasn't life-changing money. It was still a secret I kept hidden from my family. But every single dollar was a brick in the foundation of something that was mine. It was the first blood, the first taste of victory, and it was the most delicious thing I had ever known. As the numbers grew, so did Mirko's expectations. He was relentless, pushing me on my margins, my marketing spend, my customer acquisition cost. He was a brutal teacher, but an effective one. One Tuesday morning, an email from him landed in my inbox with the subject line, Opportunity. He had brokered a meeting for me. It was with a major national distributor, a company that supplied office and lifestyle products to big box stores all across the country. This was the kind of deal that could take my fledgling bedroom floor business and turn it into a household name overnight. The numbers they were talking about were staggering, a level of scale I could barely comprehend. My $3,000 a month felt like pocket change compared to the purchase orders they were dangling in front of me. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the shortcut, the quantum leap. I took the video call from my room, a carefully curated corner behind me, showing a neat bookshelf, hiding the chaos of shipping boxes just out of frame. The distributor was a man named Mr. Abernathy, a slick, polished executive with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He praised my brand's aesthetic and target demographic. Then came the catch. We love the core concept, he said, leaning into his camera, but for mass market appeal, it needs to be broader, more accessible. He wanted to change the name from Aura to something generic, like Simply Organized. He wanted to replace my minimalist, thoughtful designs with brighter colors, inspirational quotes in bubbly fonts. He wanted to add stickers and accessories, turning my quiet, intentional product into a loud, cheerful commodity. He wanted to water it down, to strip it of its soul, to make it palatable for everyone, and in doing so, special to no one. You have to understand, Blythe, he said, his tone condescendingly paternal. Authenticity doesn't scale. We're offering you a chance to multiply your sales by 100-fold, 1,000-fold even. You'd be a fool to let a little sentimentality get in the way of that. It was tempting, so incredibly tempting. The money he was offering would change my life. I could move out of my parents' house. I could finally have the financial independence I craved. I could rub my success in my family's face. All I had to do was kill the very thing that had made my business work in the first place. Mirko was on the call, silent, observing. His expression was unreadable. This was a test. I could hear his voice in my head. What is your brand? What do you stand for? I thought about Ingrid from Nebraska, the burned-out doctor who had felt seen by my quiet little planner. I thought about the messages I received every day from women who thanked me for creating a space that felt calm and real. I looked at Mr. Abernathy's plastic smile and made my decision. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Abernathy," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I have to decline. The integrity of the brand is not negotiable." He blinked, his smile faltering for a split second. He clearly wasn't used to being told no. He tried to argue, to show me the projections again, but I stood firm. I chose to walk away, my heart pounding with the terrifying thought that I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. I might have just doomed my business to remain a small, insignificant hobby. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was sure I'd blown it. Mirko called me the next day. "That was a foolish decision," he said, his voice flat. My stomach dropped. "Or," he continued, a hint of something I'd never heard before in his tone, respect. "It was the smartest one you'll ever make. Now you know what you're building." 2 weeks later, something incredible happened. An influencer I had reached out to months ago, a woman with a massive following who was known for her fierce advocacy of authentic female-founded brands, finally replied. She said she'd seen my planners and loved them. She had also heard through the grapevine, a friend who worked at the distribution company, that I had turned down a massive deal to protect my brand's integrity. She was impressed. She said she wanted to do a feature on me, not a paid post, but a genuine free shout-out on her platform. The post went live on a Friday afternoon. She told my story, the story of turning down the big corporate buyout to stay true to her mission. My phone started to buzz. Then it didn't stop. The Shopify cha-ching sound, once a rare treat, became a constant glorious symphony. My sales didn't just explode, they went supernova. I did more revenue in that one weekend than I had in the previous 6 months combined. Integrity, the thing Mr. Abernathy said didn't scale, had become my superpower. The sudden surge in sales was intoxicating, but it also brought a new level of visibility I wasn't prepared for. My brand aura was no longer a secret. It was being featured on blogs, mentioned in podcasts, and inevitably, the one person I never wanted to find it, found it. My sister, Velda. I was added to a family group chat that I usually kept muted for my own sanity. My phone buzzed insistently one evening, and I glanced at it. It was a screenshot of the Aura Instagram page. The message above it was from Velda. "So this is what little Blythe has been doing with her time. How cute. A little hobby." My blood ran cold. I could feel the eyes of my entire extended family on my secret. The messages started pouring in. A cousin chimed in. "Is that supposed to be a real business? The designs look like something from the Dollar Tree." An uncle wrote, "You should have finished your business degree, Blythe. Then you might know how to run a real company." Each message was a tiny, sharp jab. They weren't just mocking the business, they were mocking me, my taste, my ambition. It was a digital version of the birthday dinner, a pile-on designed to put me back in my place. Velda, of course, delivered the killing blow. She posted a screenshot of my prices. $25 for a notebook? Who does she think she is? I'm almost embarrassed for her. It crushed me. It felt like they had broken into my house, into the one safe space I had built for myself, and spray-painted insults on the walls. The pride I felt in my work curdled into shame. I wanted to defend myself, to show them my sales figures, to scream that this little hobby was making more money than some of their full-time jobs. But I knew it would be useless. It would only feed their ridicule, so I said nothing. I just muted the chat and tried to breathe through the knot of humiliation in my chest. But the sabotage wasn't over. That same weekend, I was preparing a massive shipment of orders from the influencer post. I logged into my PayPal account, where the majority of my revenue was held, to transfer the funds to my business bank account to pay my printer. A red banner greeted me at the top of the page. "Your account has been placed under limitation. For security reasons, your funds are temporarily frozen. Frozen. All of it. I had just crossed $10,000 in monthly revenue for the first time, and every single cent was locked away. I panicked. I called PayPal, and after an hour on hold, a robotic-sounding agent told me that my account had been flagged for unusual activity after receiving multiple suspicious activity reports. They couldn't tell me who filed the reports. They just said it would take weeks, maybe even months, to investigate. I knew. I couldn't prove it, but I knew in my gut it was one of them. Velda, a cousin, someone in that group chat, who saw my success not as something to celebrate, but as a threat to their own sense of superiority. Someone who knew just how to hurt me, how to cut off the legs of my business right as it was learning to run. I couldn't pay my printer. I couldn't ship the orders. I had hundreds of angry customer emails flooding my inbox. I was on the verge of ruin. The weight of it all was suffocating. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by boxes I couldn't afford to ship, and I almost gave up. The thought of quitting, of just letting the business die and crawling back into the hole they had dug for me, was a seductive whisper. It would be easier. It would stop the pain. Then, as I stared at the wall, defeated, Mirko's voice echoed in my head. It was something he had said to me after I had told him about the family group chat incident. "Their attacks have nothing to do with you," he'd said. "It's about them. Weak people tear things down. Strong people build. You don't win by fighting them in the mud. You win by outbuilding them. Build something so big they can't ignore it, and so strong they can't break it." I looked at the frozen PayPal account, at the angry emails. This was their attempt to break me, and it had almost worked. But Mirko was right. Fighting back, accusing them, would be pointless. It would be a messy public war I couldn't win. The way to win was to become untouchable. So I pivoted, quietly, deliberately. I didn't give up. I got strategic. The PayPal disaster was a brutal lesson in vulnerability. I had put all my eggs in one basket, and my family had gleefully kicked it over. That would never happen again. The first step was to solve the immediate crisis. I emailed every single customer who was waiting for an order. I was honest. I told them there was an unexpected issue with my payment processor that had caused a delay. I didn't blame anyone. I just owned the problem. I offered them a full refund or a significant discount if they were willing to wait. Most of them, thankfully, were understanding. They appreciated the transparency. Next, I took what little money I had in my personal savings and found a new, more robust payment processor, diversifying my income streams so that no single point of failure could ever cripple me again. I spent the next 2 weeks working 18-hour days, not just to catch up, but to rebuild my entire operational foundation. This was no longer a hobby. This was war, just as Mirko had said, and I was going to build a fortress. I hired my first employee, a virtual assistant from the Philippines named Lara. She was a godsend, handling customer service and social media scheduling, freeing me up to focus on the bigger picture. Then I took the most important step of all. I went online and officially registered my business. I didn't call it Aura. I created a holding company. I filled out the forms, paid the fee, and within a week I received the official documentation. My company was now a legal entity, Corrigan Creative Holdings, LLC. The name was a private joke. I used the family name they had tried so hard to tarnish and turned it into the foundation of my secret empire. They would never recognize it. To them, I was still just Blythe, the failure with the silly notebook hobby, but on paper I was the sole proprietor of a rapidly growing enterprise. With the business legitimized, I could open a real business bank account and apply for a credit line. I was no longer operating on a shoestring. I had capital. I had leverage. I reinvested everything back into the company. I partnered with more influencers, creating a tiered affiliate program. I launched a premium line of products, leather-bound journals, high-end desk accessories, at a much higher price point, significantly increasing my profit margins. I found a third-party fulfillment agency in a different state to handle all my packing and shipping. No more boxes on my bedroom floor. My business was now a sleek, decentralized operation that I could run from my laptop anywhere in the world. By month 18, The numbers were staggering. Aura, the public-facing brand, was a success. But Corrigan Creative Holdings, the entity they knew nothing about, was clearing 6 figures a month in pure profit. I had built the fortress. And now, I was ready to acquire more territory. Mirko brought me the opportunity. He knew I had quietly cashed out a small early investment in cryptocurrency I had made with some of my first profits, turning a few $1,000s into a significant windfall. He knew I was sitting on a war chest. An email arrived from him with a single attachment, a prospectus for a luxury event resort, the Northcliffe. It was a beautiful property, a favorite for high-end weddings and corporate retreats, but it was failing. The previous owners had mismanaged the finances, and it was quietly on the verge of bankruptcy. They need a silent partner, Mirko's email read. A cash injection to stay afloat. They're desperate. You can get a significant stake for a fraction of its actual value. My heart pounded as I read the documents. It was an audacious, terrifying leap. I was an e-commerce entrepreneur. What did I know about running a resort? But Mirko guided me. We brought in accountants and lawyers. We did our due diligence. The resort's fundamentals were strong. It was just bleeding cash due to poor leadership. My investment could save it. And as a silent partner, no one would need to know who I was. With Mirko's help, I negotiated the deal. I used a portion of my crypto earnings and profits from the holding company to buy a 40% stake in the Northcliffe Resort. I became the silent power behind the throne. Over the next 6 months, I didn't just provide cash, I applied the same principles I'd used to build my e-commerce business. I helped them streamline operations, overhaul their digital marketing, and improve their customer experience. The resort's fortunes began to turn. When one of the original majority partners decided to retire, I used my position and a well-structured loan to buy out his shares. Just like that, 2 years after I was fired from a retail job, I, Blythe Kerrigan, became the majority owner of one of the most exclusive resorts in the state. And it was all a secret. A beautiful, powerful, perfect secret. A secret that was about to come in very handy. The email arrived on a Tuesday. It wasn't addressed to me personally, of course. It was sent to a generic Kerrigan family mailing list that my mother curated. The subject line read, "Formal invitation to the wedding of Velda Kerrigan and Alistair Finch." I clicked it open. The digital card was ornate, all gold filigree and flowing script. The venue was listed in bold, elegant letters, the Northcliffe Resort. My resort. I let out a laugh, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. The irony was so thick I could taste it. My sister, the person who considered me the ultimate failure, had unknowingly chosen to celebrate the most important day of her life in the palace I had secretly built. It was a plot twist from a movie. My first instinct was pure, childish satisfaction. My second, a cold wave of dread. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to sit at a table in the corner, enduring their pitying looks and backhanded compliments, knowing the entire time that I owned the ground beneath their feet. The secret was my power, and revealing it felt complicated. So I did the simplest thing. I clicked the link to the wedding website and RSVP'd for one. Will not be attending. I felt a sense of relief, as if I had dodged a bullet. I wanted nothing to do with their world. I was building my own. That evening, I had my weekly call with Mirko. I mentioned the wedding invitation offhandedly, telling him I had declined. He was silent for a moment. "Why?" he asked. "Mirko, you know why," I said, exasperated. "Why would I subject myself to that? To them? I'd rather spend the day working." "You're looking at it the wrong way," he said, his voice firm. "This isn't about them anymore. You think avoiding them is a sign of strength. It's the opposite. It means they still have a hold on you. It means you're still afraid of their judgment." I started to argue, but he cut me off. "Show up," he said, the words landing with incredible force. "Don't go to prove them wrong. That's a fool's errand. You'll never get the validation you think you want from them. Go to show yourself who you've become. Go stand in that room, not as the little sister they tormented, but as the owner of the damn building. See them through your new eyes, not theirs. It's the final step in your liberation, Blythe. You have to close the loop." His words chipped away at my defenses. He was right. Hiding wasn't strength. It was still a reaction to them. True power was being able to stand in their presence and feel nothing but the quiet confidence of my own achievements. An idea began to form, a plan that was both audacious and perfectly fitting. Okay, I said slowly, the plan solidifying in my mind. I'll go, but not as a guest. I could practically hear Mirko smile through the phone. Now you're thinking like a CEO, he said. The next day, I made a call. I didn't call the public reservations line. I called the private number of Naveen Patel, the resort's general manager. I had hired him myself a few months ago. He was sharp, discreet, and fiercely loyal. Naveen, I said, I have a special request for the Kerrigan wedding. I laid out the plan. I would be there, but I would be on the staff roster for the evening. I would wear the uniform. I would blend in. No one on the event team, apart from him, was to know my true identity. I wanted to see it all from the ground level. I wanted to watch them, unobserved. And then, at the right moment, I wanted him to handle the reveal. Consider it done, Ms. Kerrigan, he said, a note of amusement in his professional tone. The timing will be impeccable. I hung up the phone, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum. I wasn't going to the wedding for revenge. Mirko was right. I was going for me. I was going to walk into the heart of my own history, and quietly, definitively, rewrite the ending. The day of the wedding arrived with a sky the color of pale silk. I drove to the resort, not in my new comfortable sedan, but in my old beat-up car, the one I had cried in 2 years ago. It felt fitting. I parked in the staff lot, far from the gleaming luxury vehicles pulling up to the valet at the grand entrance. I arrived hours early, dressed in simple jeans and a t-shirt, and went in through a service entrance. The back of house was a hive of activity, florists rushing past with massive arrangements of white roses, kitchen staff shouting orders, event planners with clipboards and headsets orchestrating the chaos. I found Naveen in his office, a small, neat space overlooking the loading dock. He stood up the moment I walked in. He was a man in his 40s, with kind eyes and an air of unflappable calm. Miss Kerrigan, he said with a small, respectful nod. Everything is proceeding as planned. Thank you, Naveen, I said, feeling a strange sense of calm. Just blithe for today. He smiled. Of course, your uniform is ready for you. He handed me a hanger with a crisp black button-down and pressed slacks. The final toasts are scheduled for 9:30. I will handle the introduction personally, just before the groom's toast to the bride. Perfect, I said, tasteful, and with perfect timing. I assure you, he said, his eyes twinkling, it will be a moment no one will forget. I changed in a staff locker room, the unfamiliar fabric of the uniform feeling like a costume, but as I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I didn't see the humiliated girl my family wanted me to be. I saw a woman in control, a ghost at the feast, yes, but a ghost who owned the house. I spent the next hour walking the grounds observing. I watched the final touches being put on the ballroom. The tables were set with my company's finest linens. The floral arrangements, which I knew cost my father a small fortune, were perfect. I had approved the vendor myself. I blended in. I was just another face in the background, invisible, and it was from this vantage point that I saw my family arrive. My mother, Wren, swept past me in the main lobby, her eyes scanning the opulent decor with an expression of smug satisfaction. She was wearing a pale blue dress that screamed money. She looked right at me, her gaze passing over my face without a flicker of recognition. I was just part of the scenery. I felt a strange pang, not of hurt but of something else, pity, maybe. She was so blinded by status that she couldn't even see her own daughter standing 2 feet away. Then came Velda. She was radiant, of course. Her dress was a confection of lace and silk, but her face was tense, her movements sharp and brittle. She was a bride, but she looked more like a general inspecting her troops. She saw me standing near a service corridor, holding a tray of empty water glasses I'd picked up. She didn't recognize me either, not at first. Then her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of confusion, then dawning, cruel amusement. She couldn't place why I looked familiar, but she recognized me as someone who didn't belong. She strode over, her wedding dress swishing around her. You, she said, her voice sharp. She thrust a stack of misplaced place cards into my hands. These go on the head table. Now. She didn't wait for a reply, just turned and stalked off. The humiliation she intended to deliver didn't land. It was like a dart thrown at a granite wall. I just stood there, holding the cards, a small smile playing on my lips. They thought they were humiliating me. They were giving me a front row seat to their own undoing. I let them. I placed the cards. I refilled water glasses. I served appetizers, and I watched. I was a silent observer, gathering data, watching the scene unfold with a clarity I had never possessed before. The storm was coming, and for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the lightning. The reception was a masterpiece of performative joy. The toasts began just after 9 o'clock. One by one, friends and family stood to offer saccharine tributes to Velda and her new husband, Alistair. I stood near the back of the grand ballroom by a service station, pretending to polish wine glasses. From my vantage point, I could see everything. I saw my father, Martin, beaming with pride, not for his daughter's happiness, but for the advantageous match she had made. I saw my mother, Wren, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, a perfect portrait of maternal emotion for the benefit of the guests. And I saw Velda, seated at the head table, soaking in the adoration like a flower soaking in the sun, occasionally glancing around the room with an air of regal ownership. She had no idea. The final toast was set to be from the groom. As Alistair stood and tapped his glass for attention, Naveen Patel moved gracefully to the small lectern at the side of the stage. He held up a hand. "If I may, just for a moment," he said, his voice calm and clear, amplified by the microphone. A ripple of confusion went through the room. This was not on the program. Alistair looked momentarily flustered. "Before we hear from the groom and close out the night's formal remarks," Naveen continued, his eyes sweeping across the sea of expectant faces, "the management of the Northcliffe Resort would like to take a moment to honor a very special person who is with us tonight. The person who, in truth, made this entire beautiful event possible." A murmur went through the crowd. I saw my father puff out his chest slightly, a small, self-satisfied smile on his lips. He clearly thought Naveen was about to thank him for his patronage, for spending so much money. Velda looked intrigued, a little pleased at this unexpected extra dose of recognition. "This person is a visionary," Naveen went on, his tone measured and deliberate. "Someone whose quiet leadership and brilliant strategy not only saved this beloved resort from closure, but has set it on a path to unprecedented success." The gasps were audible now. People were looking around, confused. My father's smile faltered. He hadn't saved the resort. Who was Naveen talking about? My heart began to pound, a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. This was it. I put down the wine glass I was holding. "We would like to honor our resort's majority owner, the creative force behind its revitalization." Naveen's voice rang out, each word landing like a perfectly placed stone. "Miss Blythe Kerrigan." Silence. A complete, profound, and absolute silence that swallowed every other sound in the room. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the ballroom. Then the silence broke. It shattered into 1,000 whispered fragments. My mother's hands began to shake uncontrollably, rattling the silverware at her place setting. I saw my father, Martin, literally stumble backward into his chair, his face a mask of slack-jawed disbelief. His ruddy complexion had gone a ghastly pale white. Velda just stared, her lips parted, but no words came out. Her perfect bridal makeup couldn't hide the ugly shock twisting her features. She looked from Naveen to me, as I began to walk forward from the shadows of the service station. A cousin near the front whispered, her voice carrying in the stunned quiet, "She owns this place." I untied the white apron from my waist and let it fall to the floor. I walked calmly toward the front of the room, my simple black uniform now looking less like a servant's attire and more like a statement of minimalist power. Every eye was on me. The weight of their collective gaze was immense, but it no longer had the power to crush me. I felt light. I reached the lectern, and Naveen gave me a subtle, respectful nod before stepping away. I didn't need the microphone. I looked directly at the head table, at my family, at my father, who looked like he'd seen a ghost, at my mother, who looked like she was about to faint, at my sister, who looked like her entire world had just been burned to the ground. "I wasn't invited tonight as family," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the silent room with perfect clarity. "But I wanted to be here. I made sure the venue was perfect for my sister's special day. The aftermath of my words was not a fiery explosion, but a slow, crumbling collapse. Velda was the first to try and regain control, a reflex born from a lifetime of being in charge. She let out a shaky, unconvincing laugh. "Blythe, don't be ridiculous, this is some kind of sick joke." She looked around for support, but found none. The faces staring back at her were filled with confusion and a dawning, terrible understanding. "You got lucky," she spat at me, her voice shrill. "You probably won some lottery or something. You could never do this on your own." Her denial was pathetic, and everyone knew it. The proof was all around them, in the luxurious fabrics, the gleaming chandeliers, the very air of opulence that I now owned. My father found his voice next. He pushed himself out of his chair, his face a mottled red. He wasn't congratulatory. He was furious. "How?" he demanded, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Where did you get the money for this? What have you been doing?" It wasn't a question of a proud father, it was the interrogation of a frantic investor who has just discovered a massive, off-the-books asset he had no control over. He saw my success not as a triumph, but as a secret I had kept from him, a betrayal of his authority. My mother, Wren, said nothing. She just stared at her plate, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her carefully constructed world of social status and appearances had been shattered. The daughter she had written off as a liability, the one she had been ashamed of, was now the source of a power and status she couldn't comprehend. Her pride, so intricately linked to my father's success and Velda's perfect life, was now in ruins. In the midst of their chaos, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with a terrifying cocktail of emotions, fear, regret, and a deep, soul-crushing shame. She muttered something, a sound so faint I almost missed it. "I'm sorry." It was the first apology I had ever heard from her, and it was weak, hollow, offered not out of love but out of sheer, overwhelming shock. Naveen stood quietly to the side, a perfect, neutral observer, his face a mask of professionalism, but I could see it in his eyes. He was a witness to the complete and total reversal of a family dynasty, the quiet transfer of power from the loud and arrogant to the silent and strategic. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need to. Their reactions told me everything. I simply gave a small nod to Naveen, turned, and walked away from the lectern, leaving them to simmer in the wreckage of their own making. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air. It was a text from Mirko. I answered. "So," he said, his voice laced with a rare and genuine warmth. "How did it feel?" I looked up at the stars, the scent of night-blooming jasmine from the resort's gardens filling the air. "Quiet," I said. "It felt quiet." "Good," he replied, "because you didn't just win a fight tonight, Blythe. You didn't just get revenge. You changed the entire script. They don't get to write your story anymore. From now on you hold the pen." I hung up the phone, a feeling of profound peace settling over me. He was right. It wasn't about winning. It was about ending the game entirely. The wedding was the end of one story, but it was the beginning of mine. I didn't stick around to watch the rest of the party disintegrate. I got into my old car, the symbol of my past, and drove away from the resort, the symbol of my future, feeling no triumphant glee, only a quiet, settled sense of release. The very next week I moved. I signed a lease on a bright, airy apartment in the city center, one with huge windows and a view of the skyline. The first night, I sat on the floor of the empty living room, eating takeout from a box, and I felt a sense of peace that was so profound it almost felt like a physical presence. This space was mine. I had earned it. The rent wasn't paid by a father who saw me as a burden or a husband I needed for status. It was paid by Kerrigan Creative Holdings. It was paid by me. My relationship with my family, or what was left of it, shifted into something unrecognizable. My father called, demanding a business meeting. He wanted to see my books, to understand my assets, to find a way to absorb my success into the family portfolio he controlled. I politely declined. My mother called, crying, alternating between apologies and accusations. She couldn't understand why I was being so cold, so distant. I didn't have the energy to explain that the distance was a wall I had built for my own survival. Velda didn't call at all. I heard through the grapevine that she and Alistair had cut their honeymoon short. Apparently, the revelation that her family's failure owned the venue where they had just sworn their eternal love had cast something of a pall over the romance. I didn't chase their validation anymore. I didn't need it. My focus shifted. I used the resources of my holding company to create a small grant program for female entrepreneurs. I started mentoring two young women who were in the same position I had been 2 years ago, full of ideas, but lacking resources and confidence. One was building a sustainable fashion brand from her garage, the other was developing an app to help people with anxiety. I met with them weekly, offering the same kind of tough, practical guidance that Mirko had given me. Seeing the spark in their eyes, the same hunger I had felt, was more rewarding than any grudging respect my family could ever offer. A few weeks after the wedding, I sat down at my new desk, in my new apartment, and I started to write. I opened a blank document and typed a title, "The Party Where They Fed Me Humiliation," and I served it back hot. I wrote my story. Not for them, not for public consumption, but for me. I wrote about the pain of that birthday dinner, the desperation in the car, the late nights fueled by coffee and defiance. I wrote about Ingrid from Nebraska and the thrill of that first sale. I wrote about the sabotage, the fear, and the quiet resolve to outbuild them all. I wrote it all down, letting the words pour out, closing the loop on that chapter of my life. I wasn't the victim in the story anymore. I was the author. And I ended the post with the only line that mattered, the one thought that had echoed in my mind, as the waiter stood beside me at the reception, ready to change my life with a single question. Next time they ask who I am, the waiter will know where to set my plate. No one gets to write your ending but you. Silence is not weakness, it's preparation. Have you ever been humiliated by someone who thought you'd never rise? What would you say to them now? Let me know in the comments. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe for more real revenge-fueled victories. I'm just getting started. You are too.